what is our objective? And the president, the administration has got to specify with clarity, what is our objective? And saying that we're with them for as long as it takes, that's not clarity. That's not anything. That's a totally empty statement. So they've got to, and they can't say, well, we want Russia to lose or we don't want Ukraine to lose. That's not clarity. So specifying Ukraine will win, Ukraine can win, and it can happen this year. And winning equals total restoration of all Ukrainian territory, and then returning deportees, war crimes accountability, and then some kind of a guarantee for Ukraine after this. So if that's when they state that, then all kinds of things start happening. And Clausewitz would say, okay, well, that means Crimea, because Crimea is the decisive terrain. You could kill every Russian soldier in Donbass and it would not change the outcome. You liberate Crimea, that changes the outcome. Imagine that Ukraine agreed to some sort of a peace deal, and the price, which a lot of people are saying, come on, let the Russians have Crimea. Give that up. It's got red ribbons all around it and all kinds of other scary warnings. So let them have that, and then we can stop the killing. Right? Imagine that what happens in 2 or 3 years. Well, over the next 2 or 3 years, if Russia continues to sit in Crimea, they will never take down that big bridge. They will never allow any vessels to go up into the Azov Sea. So even if Mariupol and Verdansk, seaports number 2 and 3 for Ukraine, were liberated, no ships would be able to go in and out of Sea of Azov. Russia has zero credibility for living up to any agreement like that. And then Odessa. There's already 100 ships loaded with grain sitting in Odessa waiting to be inspected by some Russian inspector so that they can head through the straits.
Right. And Odessa, of course, is under Ukrainian control, but to exit the sea is, of course, controlled by Russia.
Exactly. So Russia's control of Crimea gives them the ability to dominate all of Ukraine's Black Sea coast. So you've got a country whose economy is based on export of grain, of rare earth materials, iron ore. So those ports, Odessa, Kherson, Verdansk, and Mariupol, that's key to their economy. So their economy will never be rebuilt. And then after 3 years, Russia will have replenished all their losses. They'll wait for us to lose interest. And then here we go again, where they've got the Black Sea Fleet and on and on and on. So in other words, Ukraine will never be safe, it'll never be secure, and it'll never rebuild its economy as long as Russia occupies Crimea. That's why it's decisive. And I was at Munich Security Conference 2 weeks ago, spoke with a very, very, very senior executive of one of the 2 or 3 largest international investment firms on the planet. He said, if there's no ironclad guarantee for Ukrainian security, there will be no investment. There's no Marshall Plan. So they can't be secure as long as Russia occupies Crimea. That's why we have to help them get that. And it can be done, but not the way that the Pentagon describes it. It's, what they talk about is basically like a squeegee, that just pushes everything back. Clausewitz would say, focus your main effort on the enemy's center of gravity. In liberation of Crimea is that center of gravity. You do that, all that stuff in Donbass, that happens later. There will be a lot less enthusiasm for so-called separatists fighting there once Crimea has been liberated, because that will unleash changes inside Moscow as well. So people would advocate for rewarding Russia with aggression, war crimes, all the different things that they've done, all in front of us, to reward that with letting them have territory that they have illegally occupied and annexed. So right there, that's a deal breaker for me. But it was not what the Ukrainian situation looked like in, let's say, January of 22, was not what it was like in January of 15. In other words, starting around 18 or 19, they were building this big giant bridge, the Kerch Bridge. That automatically was an illegal act, and it began to disrupt traffic coming in and out of Azov Sea. And then you'll remember, I think it was in 19, is when they seized the 3 Ukrainian vessels who were trying to go around Crimea into the Kerch Straits. And so that right there should tell everybody, remind everybody who we're dealing with, that the Russians are not going to just stand by and let Ukraine begin to move ships in and out of Azov Sea.
Let's talk about the Ukrainian mindset, starting with the President Zelensky. and their military. They don't seem to be emphasizing Crimea, at least in their words, as much as they're talking about the challenges to the east and the southeast and the Donbass and elsewhere. Do you think they share your assessment, and is simply they're trying to get what they can in terms of buy-in from the West? In other words, the West is clearly supportive of repelling Russia's invasion in 2022, but perhaps less enthusiastic about relitigating, certainly politically and militarily, the annexation of Crimea.
I will tell you that, number one, the Ukrainian general staff is extremely professional. They're very disciplined. They have mastered OPSEC, operational security. We know more about what the Russians are doing than what the Ukrainians are doing, as it should be. They would not advertise, hey, by the way, we're just going to continue to do economy of force over here around Bakhmut, and we're saving all our stuff for a plan to isolate Crimea. So that they would never do that, nor should they. So based on my different conversations and just looking at the map and understanding the operational level of war and what's required, the dumbest thing in the world to do would be attack into Donbass. I mean, there's no value in that. There's no strategic value for Ukraine to do that now. And I think they all have calendars. They understand what the weather is going to look like in the next few months, but they also understand what America's political calendar looks like next year, what other nations in Europe, what their calendars look like. And so they understand that there's time and there's windows. And so, again, Clausewitz would I think, advise now's your chance to liberate the decisive part of Ukraine and for this war. And that will unleash things that will happen on the other side that I think would lead to the liberation of the rest of Ukrainian territory. And the Pentagon. I mean, it's just amazing, how much has been done by by the Joint Staff and the headquarters over here in Europe to deliver capability. But it go back again. It starts with, what is the objective? If the objective is to win, then how do you win? And you win by liberating Crimea, what's needed to liberate Crimea. And it's going to be long-range precision capabilities. I always try to avoid talking too much about specific systems or platforms, because then you get involved in a contest about what kind of fuel does the M1 tank burn, or, this and that, maintenance and training, how long it takes. And those are all important things, but it's wasted energy. I mean, now, cause then you have very, very senior people in the Pentagon talking about, well, it'll take too long. It's a gas guzzler. I started wondering, well, why the hell do we have Abrams tanks? They get talked down so bad by our own, and of course they're using it as excuses not to provide an Abrams tank. So I would rather talk about capability. And if you talk about long-range precision, then there's 5 or 6 systems that would deliver the ability for Ukraine to sever the 2 landlines of communication that connect Crimea to Russia. One, obviously, is the Kerch Bridge. The other is the so-called land bridge that runs through Mariupol and Melitopol down into Crimea. That requires something more than the 90 kilometers that the GMLRS can reach. So ground-launched small diameter bombs, ATACMS, obviously, Gray Eagle drones, I think the British Storm Shadow, F-16s, I'm absolutely not against it, but I think, we spend so much time arguing about how long it would take, when we should have started training months ago in anticipation of a possible